This is The Process Shot. I'm Michael, I'm stuck in a haunted movie theater, and I've seen Cat People, a horror film from Paul Schrader made back in 1982 that serves as a remake of the 1942 film from Jacques Tourneur. This story is a far cry from that film, though it does respect the source material enough, following the original story of Irina, a woman whose ancestry lies in a race of cat people who can never love another person, for if they do, then they will become a leopard and kill their lover. This film takes it to a much further extreme, with Irina's desires for physical love much stronger than mere implications, and matched in intensity by two rival suitors. Oliver, the curator of a New Orleans zoo who finds himself obsessed with her, and Paul, a new character and Irina's brother who is more open in his obsessions, as intercourse with another cat person is the only way to prevent transformation. This film is pretty messed up from the start, and it doesn't ever really let down afterwards. Cat People latches onto the themes and ideas of the original film and expands upon them, foregoing any subtlety or innuendo of that story, and not only cutting right to the most obvious and somewhat realistic conclusion, but also exaggerating it, shifting any pretenses of love and affection to lust and obsession. It almost seems to forego the original film's sense of atmospheric horror and tension in favor of developing its themes, which is a bit of a downside, but makes up for it in those other ways and being more of a thematically driven horror film. Granted, there are still a good number of traditional horror elements at play, but the overall story seems more concerned with showing the darker side of human nature when it comes to carnal desires, and the lengths one would have to go, or will go, in order to have them. As a result, the characters outside of Irina, Oliver, and Paul are left a bit underwhelming. Then again, those three are pretty much defined by their own archetypes within the greater themes, Paul especially so, in a rather entertainingly manic fashion as he continually tries to convince Irina of how things must be for them to live in comfort. Outside of this exploration of themes, Cat People is a bit light in its other elements. There's still a good sense of artistry within the film, of course, but it feels secondary overall. Shots and editing are generally plain in most of the film, at least up until actual scenes of horror or unusual happenings, at which point it makes a much clearer shift into something more stylized. In some cases, it's more for horror's sake and timing scares from the audience, but in other cases, it brings them into the film's world and the characters' points of view. Most notably in a scene where Irina stalks prey within the night, seeing the world around her in a very animalistic manner, highlighting movement and sound. These quieter scenes of the hidden side of Irina are contrasted by more overt horror, employing excellent special effects that may not convince everybody, but are certainly full of grit and glut that will at least make you squirm from the viscera. And while it's not prominent throughout the film, there are even a few points that pay homage to the original Cat People, including a direct recreation of an atmospheric horror scene where a potential victim tries to hide out in a swimming pool. In the end, again, the movie feels more like a character or thematic study than a greater horror narrative, using those genre conventions to push the story along, but not relying on them at all. It delves almost a bit too much into those themes, further foregoing character and story and even common sense in some cases. That said, Cat People is still an excellent film that knows when best to shoot its shot, so to speak, and there's still plenty to leave you terrified, If not by the violence and fear of the animal within Irina, then the discomforting actions of the animal within men. You know, in a metaphorical sense, the horny sense. Cat People. Paul Schrader, 1982. 4 stars. I recommend giving it a watch. That's it from me. If you like this review, leave a like. If you've got something to add, leave a comment. As always, subscribe to the channel for more reviews. I'm not sure if I should be funny and say something that could be taken out of context later, especially when it comes to this movie.